Welcome everyone to another of the gallery webinars. I may have mentioned in the past, but the joy of being able to do these really came about during COVID. And instead of artist presentations only in the gallery, we're now able to bring people together from all over the world in order to respond to specific exhibitions that we're doing and record them. So the notion that we're not only having this now live, it will also be recorded on the website and can be shared in a meaningful way. I'm trying to think back to when Leonard Fine, otherwise known as Label Fine, then the editor and founder of Moment Magazine, approached us, Sue and I, to have an article done on our family in terms of involvement within the general and Jewish community. And Sue Pucker's general inclination is to remain private. Label promised us that it would certainly honor that and introduce us to a photographer named Bill Aron, who he said was extraordinary and an incredible human being. And it turns out it was true. He was, and Bill and Sue and I became friends, and his wife Isa, whose mother I knew from 100 years ago when I was at Columbia College. And all these things began to converge, and we then presented an exhibition of Bill's photographs. And Bill, that's got to be close to 40 years ago, I would imagine.
50, Bernie.
Who's counting? In any event, time passes in a wonderful way. And the idea of being able to bring together a selection of Bill's works over his entire career, curated primarily by Dr. Rusty Herbert or Carl Herbert, is a joy. So I'm going to begin not with a quote from Brother Thomas, but from Abraham Joshua Heschel, because it, in a sense, will hopefully frame much of what we have to say. To celebrate is to contemplate the singularity of the moment and to enhance the singularity of the self. What was shall not be again. What was shall not be again. And I think very much about Bill's journey in both places and people, and his honoring of a tradition of recording in a very meaningful way, but in this case with his camera, as a device to share with us his journey through these people and places. It's a rather extraordinary panel today. Usually I don't necessarily introduce people, but ask them to introduce themselves. But I think it's fairly relevant to share with you both Mara Williams. So Mara, if you can just bow wherever you are, and maybe be on screen. Obviously the artist Bill Aron, a second Bill, Rabbi Bill Hamilton, Rusty Herbert, and Mara Williams, who I mentioned at the beginning, plus Caroline. So there's a number of voices with a number of backgrounds to be able to share Bill's work, which we're going to begin with right now. The cover of the catalog, featuring a favorite photograph of mine for sure. Historically, Sue and I lived in Jerusalem in 1959-60, which seems like eons ago. And to have had Bill as a kind of guide to re-seeing places that we may well have seen, but seeing them very differently has been a real joy. So we can move to this particular photograph along with another. And one of the joys of this webinar is that Rusty selected couplets, and we will sort of juxtapose both people and places as we go through. So I'm going to ask Bill to begin with speaking about one or both of these two pieces, and then ask others as we go along to respond as well. Bill?
Thank you, Bernie, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. The photograph on the left, which is called Talit Steps, was at the time, this was in 1980, and at that time, I was very influenced by a photographer named Andre Cartez. I had been teaching about him as well. And his photographs are very geometric. And I was walking in Jerusalem on the ramparts that go around the old city, and I was by the Damascus Gate. and I looked down, and I was very taken by the long staircase with the dark shadows by each step and the two walls on both sides, basically the geometry of the place. When I came home, I have to confess that I did not see it as a talit at that point. But when I came home, a good friend of mine, Richie Siegel, was going through my proof sheets, and he said, "Wow, that looks like a talit." And he named it, and it's been like that ever since. I would like to, though, talk about Rabbi Eisenbach, the scribe, on the left. I was working on the Lower East Side with an organization, Project Ezra, started by Misha Avramov, which serviced the Jewish elderly poor. One of the things they did was put together youth groups or youth in the youth groups with the elderly who lived on the Lower East Side and were kind of living there alone. And these young people would visit the elderly on a regular basis, usually once a week. But for their orientation, Misha would take them around the Lower East Side to orient them to the area. So that job fell to me. And on this particular Sunday, and I had always wanted to photograph Rabbi Eisenbach. I would go in his shop and talk to him. He would tell me all about the recipes for ink that have been in his family for generations, and how he carves his pens from quills. And on this particular Sunday, as I was leading the youth group, I was standing in his doorway, and you can see the doorknob on the right side of the frame. It was a very hot day. And I saw the picture I wanted to take because of the way the light was falling and the way Rabbi Eisenbach was hunched over the scroll. My camera was around my neck, so I lifted it, and I forgot to say that I would always ask him, and going in, that he would never give me permission to photograph. So I lifted the camera, and the click of the camera is constant, but on that particular day, it was the loudest click I had ever heard. And Rabbi Eisenbach looked at me over the top of his glasses, and what I usually ask people what they think I did next. Does anybody want to volunteer a guess?
Took another picture.
No, basically, thanks, Rusty. I ran away. So about 2 weeks later, I brought an 8x10 print of this image to Rabbi Eisenbach, and he looked at it for a long time and smiled and said, "Thank you." And his son, who was apprenticing with him at the time, then wanted his picture taken as well.
So a lovely story.
That assuaged my guilt.
I see. Can we look at the pieces individually? And Mara, I'm going to ask you simply to respond to them from your perspective.
Well, first off, Rusty, I love the couplet because the river of the staircase and the river of the Torah just have this sort of beautiful reciprocity between the two of them from a formal point of view. So the pairing is just delicious to me. Again, the rhythm structures of these paintings are just so beautiful and clear, and you can they unfold for you physically in your body as well as in your eye as you travel up the steps, or you can envision yourself coming down the steps, the way the rampart is curving around, but it's a structure, and so you feel the ups and the downs, the gentle slope, the steeper sides, the curvature of the wall. So there's very definitely a dance going on in each piece. So he's not just captured a scene and described from the perspective of being atop the wall. He places you atop the wall looking down. There are what look to be two children to me, huddled doing something together in this landscape that's otherwise vacant, in this ancient place. And then when you flip to the next one, Carolyn, you have a sole person, much more focus on him. It's not just a scale device in the corner or a happenstance of catching him, those two children, because you're up on the rampart. You've walked into this scene. It's a deliberate scene. It is a solo character placed front and center, lit beautifully, just the quality of light for someone who, this is not a setup, obviously, is just beautiful how the white reflects back up off, gives light to his face, his brow, his beard, and the white flick of the end of the quill, just sitting there with the energy of what it takes for the practice of calligraphy for hundreds and hundreds upon thousands of individual letters that are being made by hand, to complete a holy book. The way the white comes out of the darks, and yet it's very clear that you're in a studio, that there are file cabinets, that there's a table there. It has volume, it has structure, but it's not the dramatic focal point of the piece, except for the fact that the darkest darks and the lightest whites just inform each other and glow or char, in terms of the juxtaposition of the dark and the light.
Lovely. I'm going to ask Bill, not Aaron, but Bill Hamilton, to respond to both images. Let's go back to the stairs first, if we can, Caroline, and then we'll move on, Bill, to the scribe.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be with you all. A deep honor. I am a rabbi in Brookline, and I actually returned from not far from where this very spot is in Israel just about a week ago, where I was for a couple of weeks. So I'm going to relate to a lot of these scenes that Bill Aron has captured very, very intimately. The notion that this is a talit is a prayer shawl is absolutely extraordinary. It's interesting that the talit itself is also the basis for the flag of the state of Israel, with the blue stripes and the star in the middle. That was what the founders of Israel back in 1948 had in mind. And the fact that this is a way in which we walk through the streets and the passageways and the ramparts of a city like Jerusalem. It could apply to other cities as well. But we're taught essentially to try to walk in God's ways in our lives, to do good. And what better way than to have the talit, which is a reminder of how to walk in God's ways with the traditions and the norms of Judaism, that I find it utterly captivating that what we wear is a reflection of where we go and how we make our way into the world each day, and both are guided by the precepts that are sacred interests, if you will, of God. I love the fact that we began with a Heschel quote, Bernie. If we could go to the other image, just a very quick thought. That is Bill Aron, the idea that this was associated with something called Project Ezra, not to mention the fact that Label Fine, of blessed memory, a dear friend, connected you and Bernie once upon a time. Ezra in the Bible is a scribe. And so the other thing I have to just say is that I love, Mara, how you were describing, and Rusty, the couplet is, again, we'll see with others, but it's extraordinary artistry on its own. I never looked at the inside of a Torah scroll, which I happen to look at pretty regularly, several times a week, when we read it publicly as part of communal prayer services on Monday and Thursday morning, and on the Sabbath, of course. I've never looked at it in terms of its geometry, and so I hope that that's helpful as some thoughts.
So let me just use a quote from Brother Thomas so that I can extend the conversation. But it also, I think, applies to Bill's capturing a particular moment. The routine of life holds us in readiness for the events of the soul or of the artist. The latter is what I added, but I think that both of these scenes, Bill, are ones that were waiting for you, and then you showed up and shared them with us. Let's move to the next image.
Wait, Bernie, before we
go ahead.
describe, I'd like to say that image has always meant a lot to me. I mean, I've always been fascinated by the concept of time. And to me, it feels like it's the intersection of memory and tradition, and the past quite literally is being written into the present in this image. And so I've always felt a deep connection with it. And I'm so glad that Rabbi Eisenbach liked the image and therefore gave me permission to use it.
Well, it certainly is one that is beloved. One of the younger clients of ours whose grandparents, father and mother, and now he have become clients, wrote the other day in response to the catalog for the show saying that this particular image had been in his home and it inspired him to want to own 2 more of Bill's photographs. So let's move on to the next couple. And here we have rather proud folks and a space that certainly needs renovation. I'm going to ask you, Caroline, to just respond to them, and then we'll have other responses as well.
I think what's really important about a lot of Bill's photographs is the black and white quality. He said he's interested in time, and I think that when you remove color and emphasize texture and tones, and it brings an emotive quality that wouldn't be there otherwise. And I think these two are great examples. I mean, the texture in the one of the building is just excellent. It brings out the beautiful ribbed ceilings and the light coming through, contrasted with these metal beams across the top and all the debris at the bottom. I mean, it's just a spectacular photograph. And then, of course, the one of the couple, I just can't get past their smiles. They're really, I mean, you caught them at the perfect time. And I would love to have a photo of that. It's just so sweet. You can't not, it's like someone who smiles at you on the street and you're not expecting it. And it kind of makes your day. They're both really unique coupled together as well.
Bill, Aron, your views?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Your response to both. Yeah.
I actually was, this is Anshe Shlonim on the left, the synagogue, one of the oldest synagogue buildings in New York City. I photographed the exterior many times throughout my time in New York. And on one particular day, the doors had been bashed in and for further vandalism. And so I wandered in and I was really struck by the quality of the light coming in through the windows. And I knew that that light only happens at one particular time of the day. And one of my teachers used to say, if you see something, photograph it now because it'll never be the same when you go back. Which relates to the quote you just mentioned, Bernie.
Yeah.
So I stood there, and one of the few times where I've only taken one image instead of doing there was nobody there moving, so I could have done 10 or so, but I was just taken by the light and the feeling that this was a holy place that I had entered. The photograph on the left, during the preparations for Sukkot, the festival of Sukkot, on the Lower East Side, people come from all over the region to buy their lulav and etrog on the Lower East Side, and every store moves their wares to the back of the store, and they all have the Lulavim and Etrogim selling, and plus there are these tables set up. People double and triple park, and nobody seems to mind. And towards the end of the day, when I was walking away from the area, I saw this couple, and I asked to photograph them. And they just turned to me with this beaming smile. And when I showed this to a friend of mine, Zev Shenkin, he looked at it and said, "Wow, that's American Jewish Gothic," referring to the American Gothic painting.
Wonderful, wonderful. Mara, would you respond to both of these images? Sorry.
Well, you should know that American Gothic is the most spoofed
Yes.
in reproduction painting in the history of America. So I just looked at this and burst out laughing. Because I know it's not a staged photograph. I know you probably just saw this couple and said,
Yes.
"Hi, may I take your picture?" And they're smiling. And if you were trying to stage it as they would have that taciturn Grant Wood thing going on. Right. And it's just, I lived on the Lower East Side in the 80s. So this is prior to that. This is in a period of real turmoil for the city in the 1970s. It was almost bankrupt. And yet there was still a thriving culture on the Lower East Side. You could still go and get your suit on the Lower East Side and have it tailored in the same day. So all the types of shops you're describing, and the people who came back to the neighborhood of their grandparents, the neighborhood of their parents, the neighborhood of their childhood. And it just, they're so happy. It's so joyous to see somebody who's just that happy, and it's a candid shot by a professional. It's not somebody's Polaroid in their house. So it is, expertly, done, and the framing and your depth of field and all the things that make it just a really strong photograph are there. But it's about joy. The other piece is really about the sacred. Even falling down because the congregation has moved on, vandalized by people who don't understand that they're standing on sacred ground, it is still sacred ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which not all churches are, not all places of worship, temples are. But when you walk into one that really is sacred ground, you feel the presence. It's undeniable. It's happened to me in various places and various cultures and various religions around the world. And this is so clearly a sacred space. Even defiled, it is a sacred space.
What a lovely insight into the piece. Carolyn, can we look at the individual images and just sort of absorb that and think about the comments about the way it was taken and the couple, the background, and then move on to the next one, and the sense of being in a holy space. Interestingly enough, Mara, the notion of holiness and of the spirit are not terms often used related to contemporary art. And I appreciate your introducing that into these images. Whether or not it was Bill's intention to capture that or not, I think it brings us to a new place and looking at these works.
Bernie, just a quick comment again, and it's come up before. There's a timelessness or a sense of time by capturing this image. This is one of the oldest synagogues. It's obviously in disrepair, but the whole idea of a continuum, a human continuum over time, is also a part of this, beautifully captured. And the light sort of sets a mood for it. But so much of what Bill is able to capture does give us that. It's the importance almost of a continuum of humanity over time. And this does it beautifully.
Yeah, if I could just add one more thought about this image in particular that's so moving, and that is, I asked Bill Aron what the direction of the would be east, right? The direction of the Holy Ark at the front of the synagogue, and that's to the left, which means that the light that's coming through is morning light. It's coming from the south, and it's literally purifying and bathing the setting, having been defiled. It's as if God's light from the orb of the sun is dawning a new time where it can actually go through a kind of purification and the restoration of the light that it emits as well as it receives.
I think we should move on to the next two images, but thank everyone for both your insights in bringing to these images who you are and what you care for. Bill Aron, would you like to begin by briefly discussing these two images and the juxtaposition that Rusty has imposed on you?
The left is an image of Rabbi Eisen. Oh no, I'm sorry, the Bobover Rebbe holding his granddaughter. I had one of the I had photographed on the Lower East Side the Cheshenover Rebbe, who had come with his surrounded by his followers, who had first blocked me, but then the Rebbe said something to them in Yiddish, which I did not understand, and they then allowed me to approach him. And I sent him copies of the photograph I had taken, and he called me up, thanked me for them, and asked me if I had ever been to a Hasidic wedding, which I had not. And he said, "Boy, do I have a wedding for you." Not in those words, of course. And so this was the wedding of the Cheshenover Rebbe's son to the Bobover Rebbe's granddaughter, not this girl. And the to our left of the Bobover Rebbe is the Chassan. The two individuals behind him are the Rebbe's bouncers, because he's a holy person and people are always trying to touch him, which makes it difficult for him to walk through a crowd. And the gentleman behind the Rebbe to our right is one of the only surviving members of his family from the war. And there are many, many stories about him and his activities during the war, helping people escape. But at this wedding, the men and women were, of course, separated. And at some point, this little girl just left the sanctuary of the women's section and ran to her grandfather, and he was just overjoyed. And I could not help but see that moment as something very special. The photograph on the right, I belonged to a group in New York called the New York Havurah, which was a non-traditional, it was a very traditional, but non-institutional group that did not belong to any of the Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox. We rented our own apartment where we held services and had meetings. We also, on holidays and on Shabbat, we once a month, we would, in addition to the holidays, we would leave the city for a weekend, Shabbat long retreat. This particular occasion was Shavuot, and we had been, it was in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, in the Eisner camp. We had been inside studying all night, and at sunrise, we came outside to say morning prayers on the porch of the building. And this is Rabbi Dan Shevitz, who wandered away from the group, and it's a large property, and he was wandering all around by the property is ringed by the trees and bushes. And I, of course, followed him. And I then, at the end, I just saw this wonderful picture with the mist behind him and the two trees sort of creating a protection over him. And at a certain point, after taking this image, I looked back to the porch, and everybody on the porch was, of course, instead of davening, they were watching us photograph him while he's walking around the field. It was taken during the Hallel prayers, by the way, so I've called this photograph Hallel.
Very nice. Mara, could you respond to both of these images? Let's look at them separately.
Okay, again, his ability to get these inky blacks and these whites, and then all the things in between is masterful. The textures, the fur hats, the lace, the eyelet lace on the little girl's dress. Somehow the Reb's coat has a feeling that it's metallic, that it's got a very different texture than the bodyguard's sort of sateen finish. There's still in the groom, there's a plushness to his coat, but the Reb's is just somehow more substantial. So there's a huge amount of information actually on almost the hierarchy of who's sitting there and why. He's clearly delighted with his child, clearly delighted that this little girl ran over to him, that there's a moment of love and expression of generations. And then I'm also just, I like pattern. I like to look at pattern and form when I look at anything. So there's sort of narrative information in this photograph. There's the beauty of the darks and the lights and the different textures and fabrics. But there are also these marvelous headdresses. And there are circles, and there's somebody with a white one way in the background. And so you have circles, and you have faces, and you have punctuation marks of light and dark. So there's just a tremendous amount of information to be gleaned, and that information tells you more about the people who are sitting there. It tells you about the fact that this has got to be a ceremonial occasion, even if you don't read the label on the side, the full descriptive label. It's clearly a celebration for this community, and it's a tight-knit community. It's a traditional community.
Beautifully said. And the next image?
Well, this one is so painterly. Oh my goodness. It's melting. The mist that you've captured, the way, it almost looks like a textile in a certain way, or a painter who uses very little paint and a hard bristled brush to just build up this texture after texture after texture after texture. There's this one person, I take him to be a holy person even without the wall text, not only because it's a large traditional prayer shawl, but there's something almost biblical about the way it is draped and the posture with which he's carrying himself in meditation, in prayer as he walks. And the fact that he is as much a part of this landscape in prayer. He's as much as part of this landscape as those bushes and then the trees towering over him. But it's the texture. It's the texture.
I should say, Bar, you pointed to something about the texture of the photograph. I knew at the time there was a particular German developer that pinpointed the grain more than other developers, but the film had to be exposed in a certain way, and I thought, well, I'm going to lose every other photograph, every other image that I had taken with the rest of the roll, but it was important for me to get that texture in the image.
And the other, Bill?
Yeah, so I was just going to say one very quick comment on this painting or this image alone. It feels like very much like a painting. We've said a lot about texture. I just want to say a word about text. The Hallel that Bill associates with the prayers that are being prayed here in this setting. Many psalms that make up not only the Hallel prayer but the entire book of Psalms talk about nature praising God. The trees singing, the mountains roaring, right? The natural world. We share a common parent, as Heschel used to say, nature and human nature, and to see them literally in harmony is so fitting for Hallel, for the Psalms that actually talk about us joining together in harmony and in praising our Maker and Sustainer.
Let me just share again, Brother Thomas, because Bill, you used a couple of words that are here in Thomas's quote. Art is an intuitive statement about humanity. Otherwise, nature would be enough. So let's move on to the next images. And Rusty, if you could introduce your choice of these two pieces and the response to both of them.
Well, several comments, and I've loved the comments so far about all the work that Bill has done, both his technical expertise. You just heard the extent to which he will do that for a piece, and that's really remarkable. But the other is the humanness of all of Bill's work. I mean, again, the idea of a person in place, even the places are the places of humans. And this set of slides again does it. The last set of slides with the young girl running up on stage, and even the sort of frightened look of the men there saying, oh my God, a woman's not supposed to be up here. And yet the Rebbe himself just embracing this child. This is a set that to me was really spectacular. First of all, each set is set in a certain place. These are shots, and there are many more of them that are fascinating and wonderful, of Jews in the South, from Mississippi to Alabama to this is South Carolina. And it's not, traditionally one thinks of Judaism in New York or Chicago, maybe LA, but Bill visited numerous Jewish communities in the South and captured a lot of what is the essence, I think, of the religion with the people. And to find a Black man who is this on the left is the sheriff of a city, Charleston, I believe in Charleston, South Carolina, who's converted to Judaism. But I'm more, from my perspective, interested in how he captured this person. And again, people and places, just think, just the ones we've gone over so far, the essence of humanity, of people, here's a Black Jewish convert sheriff in South Carolina. In South Carolina, just beautifully captured as a human being. And then the couplet was a place. So why don't we go to the single images real quick? Because I think you can see this. Let's go to the next one, just so as I talk about it. So what you see here is a Shabbat celebration on a table, looking through a window into a cotton field. And you think now of the difficulty of our country being established under slavery, and slavery essentially being the way in which cotton was made into the important piece of commodity that it was on the basis of Black slavery. So putting the Black sheriff in with this particular piece reminds us of, and Bill does this wonderfully, captures where are we? What is in some way, sort of, what is the history of what we're seeing? Is it the old church that's no longer there? Is it the beautiful trees in Western Massachusetts? Well, here we are with a wonderful sort of almost contradictory thing of, we have the parts that are used for Shabbat ceremony, the candles, everything there. And then looking out this window is a field of cotton, and it has its own memories. Now, there's nothing terrible looking at it, but it has its own memories that are part of who we are as a country. So again, each of these has its own unique quality. You put two of them together and it brings up, it's like two words, you get a resonance and other thoughts come together, but just beautiful work.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the next couplet if we can.
I don't get to tell my stories about that.
Yeah, please do.
Reuben Greenberg grew up as Reuben Green, and he went to school in Berkeley during the 60s and was active in the civil rights movement. And at a certain point, he noticed that all the people at the meetings were Jewish. Not all, but a great portion of the people were Jewish. And he began to wonder about that. And he made friends with a local rabbi, and they had conversations. And then he began studying with the rabbi and eventually converted. And he also had researched his family and found out that although he grew up as Reuben Green, there had been Jewish Greenberg in his ancestry. And so he converted and changed his name back. The photograph on the right, the Shabbat cotton, I had spent a good time with this family, the Lammensdorf family, on their plantation, and we came across this field just after they had planted it, and I asked them if I could come back when there was full, cotton, and was there a window or house with a window overlooking the field? And he said, okay, he could arrange it. So we set our date according to the Farmer's Almanac. And when I got there, there had either been too much rain or too little rain, and the cotton had come due a few days before my trip. And so cotton degrades very quickly. So they were very anxious to get me to finish my photography. There was, on the right side behind the curtain, there were about 10 of these huge, they were like a 2-3-story building, mechanized cotton pickers just waiting. And so after I photographed as much as I could think of doing from every angle, up and down, backward, step further back and closer up, I told the foreman that I was finished, and he went on his walkie-talkie to the people to his foreman out on the field with the machines. And by the time I bent down to put my camera in my camera bag and then stood back up, this field was entirely cleared.
Wow. Oh, wow.
He had enough, there were enough cotton pickers just to wipe it, go through, and there were just little
nubs,
sprigs. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Twigs and so forth. There we are. Moving on to the next one. Bill, this is a quite wonderful juxtaposition, and I think Rabbi Hamilton, Bill, would you respond to it, being back from Jerusalem and Israel just a week ago?
Yeah, it's extraordinary. To me, it's the intimacy of prayer. And literally, I'll often say to people, I hold my prayers tight for someone, especially if they're struggling to regain health, or they're going through a very, very difficult and tight time. You get the sense that there is emotion, deep emotion and intensity in the prayers. The custom, some may know, is this is the Western Wall. It's 2,000 years old. It's part of the original retaining wall of Herod's Second Temple, around the time of Jesus, and it has become customary to pray to God by writing little notes and placing them in the crevices of the very large stones that make up the Western Wall today. And so what Bill Aron has done here in two very different photos is capture the emotion of prayer. Very often I sense that when we're reciting liturgy, we're proclaiming and reciting, but we aren't necessarily adding feeling. And there's something incredibly emotive and raw and real in the ways in which these notes are crushed into the wall. making it more possible that perhaps the divine will heed the prayers and respond to them. That's the idea of placing them inside the crevices of the Western Wall. And here you have a woman in the image on the left, profoundly yearning. Yes, thank you, for someone, something, some phenomenon, and that's prayer at its best.
Let me share a quote of Thomas's, and then we'll look at them individually with other comments. But Thomas wrote this, I think, extraordinary idea or notion. We all share a creative goal with art. The goal is difficult. It is an invitation to change the world. So, Mara, would you look at them individually for us?
Well, the thing that strikes me most about this piece is how intimate it is. It's intimate that the photographer could capture this while this woman is clearly in her prayer. She's in her prayer. She's not aware of her being captured. So the intimacy of the prayer, the intimacy of a faith tradition that will go to a wall publicly and bow their head and pray is quite amazing to me. And it's I've always been jealous of people. My mother was one of those people who bowed her head. She was in her prayer, and she was in communion with her God, and there was a beauty of peace in that I was always jealous of, because that's not my relationship. Faith is a very hard one for me. And so just the idea that somebody could have that kind of faith is extraordinary to me. He's captured it so beautifully. Happy tears, dear. This is what my mother would say when she gets like me. Happy tears, dear. Happy tears. So
very, very beautiful response.
Thank you for that, Maura. That was. So I'm very moved by your tears.
Well, I'm turning more into her every day, let me tell you. So, and then the other one is, it's again, people shove their prayers in. So someone has taken, like, some of these wads of paper are very large, and so they've scripted something that was in their heart, in their mind, that was troubling them, or they were exalting in, and then they take them and they go to some place, and then they shove them in and they say their words or their prayers right there. It's, again, another tremendously poignant act of faith to me. And then the capturing of the fact that there are many individuals, which then just sort of stacks up as a community, who have put these prayers in these rocks, in this millennia-old sacred spot, a spot that has a history of a people, a history of a religion, in one of the most contested pieces of land in the world, and that you still go back there to pray is just remarkable. And it's a remarkable piece because, again, you've got the flow of the curve itself, the chock-a-block, and then the textures of the stones, the little teeny dark dots, the larger, whiter surfaces, the sort of the mini cranulations, the textures, and just everything about the textures. But it's how the light strikes that larger prayer at the top of the curve, just pulls you into the heart of the photograph, and the heart of the photograph becomes the heart of this community's prayer tradition.
Beautifully said. Bill Aron, do you want to respond briefly, or shall we move on?
Well, both these images for me are a meditation on prayer. There's Mara mentioned the idea of these prayers amidst such a contested area. There's an author that I like, Daniel Silva, and he has this very brief quote he says, "But such Such was life in the twice promised land. The past was inescapable. Arab and Jew were bound together by hatred, blood, and victimhood, and for their punishment, they would be forced to live together as feuding neighbors for all eternity. So I think that your comment, Mara, reminded me of this quote, which I keep on my computer, because it seems to me it's a perfect summation of what's going on and has gone on there.
Bill, would you mention briefly about capturing the lady who was at the wall?
Sure. She's on the women's section, and of course I'm on the men's section. I spent a lot of time at the Western Wall, and I would walk around and photograph. Very few people some did, but very few seemed to mind. And I saw this woman with her grieving face, and I just got as close as I could. The bar that you see on the right side of the screen is part of the mechitza, the separation of the separating fence between the men and women's section. And I thought my photographing would disturb her, but she apparently did not. And I got as close as I could. Any closer, I think the camera would have lost its ability to focus.
I think that the bar is really a unique thing here because it sort of sets off a space. There's a bar in the way. You can't get into this woman's life. You can't share with her you can see what she's experiencing, but you can't experience it with her. This is separated. And also just the concept of the women versus the men's side. It's just something to think about. But just, I'm sure it's so much of photography sometimes is what happens. It's not like I planned that, but then recognizing and imprinting it in a way that can affect us is unique.
Yeah, well said. Let's move on to the visit to Jerusalem in a panoramic sense, separated by the single figure on the left, and ask you, Bill, to bring us there and then let us respond to the work, both the fact that two are in color plus the black and white.
No, it's in color too.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
They're looking from a distance.
Color against the black and white background.
Right.
Well, let me talk about the ones on the right first. The bottom one with the men in the yellow shirt. The man in the yellow shirt surrounded by, he had some friends around him, and they're walking through the scene. At a certain point, I began to understand that professional photography was changing forever because of digital cameras becoming so good that it seemed anyone could take a picture, even a commercial one. And as I mentioned, I've always been fascinated by the concept of time. And there was a quote that I remember from graduate school and reading about what philosophers said about time, which has stayed with me, but I've since forgotten the name of the author. But anyway, the quote is, "Our grounds for rejecting time is that time cannot be explained without assuming time." And for me, this is an image that I took a number of images of people of this market day. And one of the series of images I took involved the man in the yellow shirt and his friends walking through the scene. And when I got home, of course, because it takes a long time, I combined these images together, and it gave me the sense that I was able to capture time in past, present, and future. To me, it was time layered upon time, all of it unfolding at once. And I came across a poet, a Norwegian poet, Olav Hogg, I think it's pronounced, who has a very perfect prayer, not prayer, very perfect poem to go with this image. And the poem goes, "Today I saw two moons, one new and one old. I have a lot of faith in the new moon, but it is probably just the old."
Lovely.
And
Bill, sorry.
yeah,
You go ahead.
I was going to go on to another image. Did you want to?
I wanted Bill Hamilton to respond because he's probably just been there, although this is 14 years or 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's just a very colorful area. I'd like to hear more of Bill Aron's comments about the other photos, but the largest gate plaza of the many gates that make one's way into the old city of Jerusalem is this Damascus Gate. It actually points north, which is why, there we are, which is why if you head out the gate from the old city of Jerusalem, you keep going, you'll end up in Damascus. And so it is the busiest of the gate plazas. The Jaffa Gate is driven into on the other side, but this I've often felt geometrically and in terms of ingathering is really unique. And frankly, it looks today exactly as it looks in this image back in 2011, I believe, and it remains a very, very colorful place of quite international and quite special. And again, it's a gateway. A gateway is an entryway, and hopefully for all people of whatever their faith position may be.
Caroline, your thoughts? This is an opportunity for you to visit Jerusalem free of charge.
That'd be nice. I find it so, I think because the composition is so linear and it's somewhat split between this looming large gate that is from a different time and then the very modern day people walking around, and the contrast between the two is what I find the most interesting. And then on top of that, there's the symmetry of the gate and then the asymmetry of the people moving around. It creates this very unique language of stillness and motion, and then contrasting that with modern, I guess, time. And Bill's mentioned time a whole lot, and I can see how that comes out here.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that speaks to a lot of what I had in mind with this image. This also was taken over, I believe it was 5 days. I had my camera on a tripod, and I put gaffer's tape underneath a little piece underneath each of the legs of the tripod, so I could come back to the same space all the time. Over the 5 days that I took to do this photograph. And so none of these people, I should say the whole crowd was not there at the same time. And it was bringing together people who would not have been together. And in thinking about this image, I did, each time the light was the same and everything was the same, but the people kept changing. And so I wanted to bring them together. And the photograph was constructed around the little girl in red in the center of the photograph. And I thought a lot about this image, and I'd like to read the thoughts that I had to get them right. For me, the architecture of the image is fixed, but the human presence is fluid. And this gate has stood for centuries, but the people are there for only a few minutes. And this tension between permanence and change is really how I've come to understand, for me, the essence of rhythm of life itself.
Let me share with you a quote of Thomas's. We'll look at the next and last photograph near the Damascus Gate in a moment. We are not material beings on a spiritual journey, but spiritual beings on a material journey. And Bill, you just essentially took us on that journey for yourself. Let's
Can we
look at the
can we
third
look at
one.
the one woman?
That's what I'm saying. But look at the next one.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Rusty, you are
Well,
ready to go.
actually, I would like to hear Bill concept of it. I mean, it speaks for itself, but I think how it was constructed will offer a richness to it.
This woman, I photographed in this place. This is right at the entrance to the gate itself, and people coming and going. It's so very busy. And I did a number of images, and then this woman appeared, and she was just of such amazing beauty, and dressed the way she was. I mean, as a Western male, I thought, oh, why did she have to be all clothed like that? But because of her beauty, I built the image around her, of people walking back, and I wanted to keep her presence really, keep her presence highlighted. And so everything else I turned to black and white, and I left her in color.
So it's just, again, Bernie, just very briefly, another beautiful example of Bill Aron's people in places with a personal element of this is a human being. I mean, this is an individual. We just saw all that interesting architecture and lasts a long time, et cetera, et cetera. But he's equally comfortable and amazingly adept at making it a very personal statement. And this is an absolutely fabulous photograph.
Thank you all. We're going to move to the final couplet, I think.
Yes.
And Bill Hamilton, if you want to begin, one on one side is, well, we'll put them up individually. Let's look at the one from the Soviet Union. It's a pretty good image for you to begin talking about.
Yeah, it's joy and it's dancing. This is the holiday of the celebrating of the Torah scroll, the final holiday of the fall season, which is typically filled from the new year of Rosh Hashanah to the end of Simchat Torah, which is this scene. They're in the Moscow synagogue in 1981, which is extraordinary given the place of religion and Judaism, in particular religion in general, in the former Soviet Union. And they're dancing. They're filled with joy. They're streaming through the synagogue with joy. And I just love the way Rusty has made this juxtapose, this couplet with the other image of the early morning light. That is, I believe, if we go to the next one, it is, yes, the early morning light in the old city of Jerusalem, in the market. It's unoccupied, it's vacant, there aren't people streaming through with joy the way there are in the other image, but that aisle is in this case, again, just like the image back of that synagogue, the light coming through to purify it and to warm its confines even after a painful period and an absence. Here you see the light and the dawn of a new day and the beginning. It's clearly the beginning because if this were the end of the day, all these shops would be wide open and it would be populated. So I just love the juxtaposition that Rusty's made with this couplet, and the extraordinary juxtaposition, which I'm eager to hear others more able than I to comment on, between the dark and the light in this image, and actually in the other image as well.
Mara, would you speak to both images?
Well, I think, Rusty, it's a beautiful curatorial choice to put these two together, because there is the central stream, the central arrow of light formed from the shadow of all the overhangs of the building. So it's more geometric, it's clearer because it's not a motion. The capturing of movement on film of the dancing through the central aisle of the temple has that softer, just how motion is captured on film. It always, like, and Bill's interest in time, you do see the time because of how everything just diffuses itself, in this movement, and it's people and place, but this is a very specific place. It is a temple. It's the central aisle of this temple, because it looks like that's the bima up, or the steps to get up to the bima at the top of the photograph, and the funnel is actually in the reverse order of the way the arrow gets formed in the desolate street, the early morning of the marketplace, and how everybody seems to be starting at the bima end of and coming out and filing out of the church to the door. I don't know, there's this I don't want to call it stopgap motion, because that's not exactly what it is. I'm trying to figure out the words of how motion is captured and then frozen in this way that it looks painterly and misty, as opposed to the very stark shadows and geometries of the other piece. I love them particularly together. I think that it would be hard if I were a collector to not buy both of them, because they pair so beautifully, Rusty. For all of you out there in WebinART land, buy them together. That's my advice.
I love it. So, Caroline, could you comment on these, and then Rusty, and then Bill Aron?
I was thinking of these two as like a diptych. They almost need to go together because they're so interesting together. Not all, but a lot of Bill's work. I mean, the composition is very, very strong. These ones break into a level of abstraction, that the composition breaks into abstraction that allows you to enter more into possibilities of what the meaning behind each one of these is. I think Mara pointed out too, what's nice about the composition between the two is one has this fluidity and one has a rigidity of angles. Of course, the people flowing, they're almost going down this waterway with the all the seats going along there really contrast it beautifully. And then the light coming through on the street, I mean, it's just the way it pierces the darkness. That's the level of the abstraction. You could think, well, this light is coming through and it's beautiful and it's a nice composition and it's this location. But you start to think, well, this darkness is existing in these closed doorways, and the light just breaks it. And it just shows you the strength of light over darkness. And they're both beautiful pieces, and I would want to have them together as well.
Rusty?
Oh, just briefly, this was not as much people and places, although it is people and place, as it was just the contrast of motion and stillness, and the fact that both motion and stillness create within us, this would be a Brother Thomas quote somehow, the human emotion. This is a very quiet street, but it just resonates with, as Rabbi Bill said, that 3 hours later, there's stalls everywhere. There's thousands of people in here, or hundreds of people in here. But there's a humanness even in that stillness. There's a humanness because maybe the light, as Caroline was saying, the light in the darkness. And then the motion, the human motion of the synagogue in Moscow. It's like, so much is simply my admiration for Bill Aron's photography. I mean, these two contrasts, very different contrasts, from the same person who thinks deeply about what do these images do to the viewer? How does the viewer resonate with them? Not just what am I throwing out there, but what does it mean? Because it means something to Bill, and he can talk briefly and I'll shut up, but it means something to him, obviously. And I think so much great art does mean something to the artist, which we, the viewers, hopefully can tap into.
Bill?
The arrow photograph is my ode, along with the Talit steps, to Andre Cortez. Excuse me. Only I didn't quite measure up because Cortez, in all of his photographs, as geometrical as they are, he always has an element of life in each one, whether it's a bird flying through the scene or a person. But I saw this composition and I immediately thought of him and took the picture, made the image then. It's the other photograph from the former Soviet Union. It's difficult for me to sum up my feelings about that trip, which are really quite profound, in the sense that I met with and photographed several, I actually never counted them, but about 15 to 20 refuseniks. I had been, the trip was sponsored by the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles because the Soviet Jewry movement, this was in 1981, was clearly off the ground and gaining momentum, but there were no photographs of the people. And so they wanted me to go and meet with the refuseniks and bring back portraits of them, which I, of course, was happy to do. But seeing these people struggling to maintain their Judaism in the face of such punishment moved me to my core, when here I was free to be Jewish in any way I wanted. And at times I was very minimally so. When a person, they're called refuseniks because when they applied for a visa to immigrate to Israel, they was, of course, denied right away, but they lost their job. Their children were harassed in the schools. I met with, I'm going to read a quote from Yuli Kosharovsky that I met with, who was a mathematician. He studied languages by reading dictionaries. He had already mastered French, German, English, and was studying Arabic while I was there. He was a man who was working as a street sweeper because he had applied to immigrate to Israel. And in terms of what it, I think for me, the real lesson at the time was what their lives were like. Yuli gave me this, and then I want to, after this, I want to just say a couple sentences about that photograph. But he told me that he made a powerful statement about what it means to be a refusenik. He said, what does it mean being refused? This means being dismissed from your job, to be without money, to worry about your children who are hounded in schools and who won't be accepted in any institution, to lose all your friends, to have trouble with the militia, with house janitors, with neighbors, and with the KGB. And this means that your time of life is passing without return, that the present has lost all sense and value, that you have been thrown out of the present and not given a future, that you are a shadow person. So this photograph took place at the end of my stay. I was there for Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Simchat Torah. They're outside in front of the synagogue was located on Arkhipova Street, and it was a very narrow street, but kind of long, and there were thousands upon thousands of refuseniks and Jews who had gathered for Simchat Torah. This is on the eve. For the refuseniks, Simchat Torah was their holiday because it symbolized to them the ability to start over, the freedom to begin a new life, which they were trying to do by leaving the Soviet Union. I have to say that for the most part, everybody remained outside socializing and dancing and just having fun with each other. But inside, there were a few, it was much less crowded. And during Hakafot and marching around the synagogue with the Torah scrolls, you can see the tops of the Torah scrolls and some of the blurred movement in the center of the frame. And I went up to the women's section and looked at and looked down and took this photo, and I wanted to capture the movement of passing from one place to another place. And so it's about a second, maybe a second and a half long exposure. And what surprised me in looking at the image afterwards was not that there was movement, because, you know, I had wanted that, but there were so many people in the audience who remained absolutely still at that moment, that their features are very sharp if you look at the print closely.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I could go on forever about that trip, but we'll leave it for another time.
With pleasure. Let me conclude by thanking everyone first and foremost for sharing in this opportunity to talk about your work, Bill, and also to end with a quote from Thomas, which I think in a way sums up your relationship to the privilege of doing what you have done. Doing something out of duty is fine, but doing it out of love is divine. And it seems to me that you really took upon yourself this journey to people and places out of love. And that comes through both technically and artistically, but it comes through emotionally as well for all of us. So thank you. We're looking forward to having you here for the opening of the exhibition and inviting everyone to look at the catalog online, come to the gallery, and be with Bill the 13th and 14th of this month. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for your comments, which I was very moved by.
Well, the work is very special. Have a great wedding, Rabbi, or two.
Thank you. Deep honor.